Hi, welcome to Money Matters TV. I'm your host, Patty Tawadros, and my co-host today is Jim Lorenzo from Jim Lorenzo Public Relations.
Hello
nice
again,
to
Patty.
see you.
Good to see you.
So a little bit out of our typical format, thought let's start with this question that an audience member sent in. So Thomas Dillon from Philadelphia wants to know, what do you think about all the comments for fake news?
Well, it's interesting. Our president really did create a new term that's in our social context. Everybody is talking about fake news. And I think if you had looked into this or mentioned it 3 or 4 years ago, nobody would have known what you were talking about. And now everyone has an opinion on what fake news is, or if there is fake news. And I think what is interesting to me is what people perceive to be fake news, what other people perceive to be fake news, what I think is fake news. And if you sit and watch a network newscast or you sit and watch a cable newscast, there are a lot of things that, in my mind, are fake news or dumb news.
Well, how do you differentiate it or determine what's fake and what's not?
I think you determine it by doing your own research, by being an avid reader, by learning more about the topics that are being discussed on television or on talk radio, not just taking their word for it, not just taking a commentator's word for it or taking a anchor's word for it, but actually going out and reading a newspaper or reading an article online or following up. You know, I saw the headline about this, I want to know more about this. So you do a Google search and start looking at other stories.
So
it's important to have other perspectives so that you can decide, is that really fake or is it?
So I heard this lecture and I thought it was really interesting, and this woman spoke about this topic, and it was that if you believe that Trump is horrible, you're going to seek out other things that confirm how you feel. And if you think he's the second coming, you're going to seek out things that confirm how you feel.
It's called confirmation bias.
Right. So
and everybody has that.
So if you go online and you Google it, you're going to read the articles that resonate with you. And if you read the ones that don't, how do you, I mean, which news sources?
Well, that's how you have to determine how educated you want to be, how informed you want to be. It's all an individual choice. Mm-hmm. For the president to label something as fake news, well, that's his opinion.
Right.
Is it fake news or not? You have to have your own opinion. You have to have your own point of view. And if you don't do that, or if you just rely on everybody else to tell you what your opinion is, mm-hmm. then you're doing yourself a disservice. So I actively try to ask people, what did you read about this? Where did you hear about this? What is your opinion about this? And if they said, well, I heard it on NPR, but did you look anywhere else? Did you hear it on CBS News? Did you hear it on CNN? Did you watch Fox News? We have our biases and our opinions are formed by what we listen to, but we also need to educate ourselves more. And I think that that's where the failing is. Now, I look at fake news completely differently. I think there are fake stories or fake things that were in the newscast every night. Now, I'll take for an example ABC's World News Tonight. They start their program with 3 things that are breaking right now or breaking news. And these are things that may have happened 3 or 4 hours ago, mm-hmm. or things that happened 2 or 3 days ago. But they're treating at the beginning of their newscast that this is breaking news.
Because they have people that only watch that show.
Right.
Right.
And I look at that as that's what's fake to me. Mm-hmm. Is if something happened 2-3 days ago and you're just getting around to reporting it, and that you're terming it breaking news, well, I question that news judgment. I question their production values and what they're doing to editorially to put that story together.
You know, we watch well, not we, because I don't like to watch the news. I'd rather read it. But my husband will put on news. He'll switch between CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and try and get different viewpoints and pick out maybe the kernel of truth that might be in there. But we'll watch the news at 9:30 at night on some cable channel, and they say breaking news, and I just think, yeah, breaking for your show,
right.
Not for today.
Exactly. And so much of what we see now is driven by the cable news shows that are on from 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and those are not anchors, those are not news readers, those are not reporters, those are opinion hosts. Mm-hmm. Rachel Maddow's not a reporter.
Right.
Hayes isn't a reporter. He's what we used to call back in the old days, a news reader. He's reading something that's being put on the teleprompter or putting in a page in front of him, and then they're formulating their own opinions and having conversations with panelists. That's not news, that's opinion.
And then you have Facebook actually putting out ads now that they're going to start to hide that stuff.
Yeah, I think that is interesting, but I also think it's kind of an overreaction to, Facebook's failing on monitoring their ad technology.
Yeah.
Instead of, and so they're overreacting by over monitoring their news technology. There's a difference between paid advertisement and earned media coverage, which is you and I both know from our work experiences. But Facebook is putting a higher value on editorial control over the news content, and they should be placing more emphasis on their ad content.
You know what I think is not trending that I wish would trend so I could follow it is like hashtag Where's Melania?
It is that's another interesting story, but on the historical context, the First Lady, look back at Mamie Eisenhower or Bess Truman. These were people who kept a very low profile and nobody worried about them. Why did we all of a sudden start to have this high profile? And it started with Jackie Kennedy, actually.
Did it
because
really?
She was so photogenic and she was so media savvy that she knew how to, and President Kennedy knew how to respond to the public and say, okay, well, Jackie will take this one. So we've become used to the fact that our First Lady has a high public profile. And really, should she? I understand the concern of where's Melania, but at the same time, why do we care?
Well, I guess people are obsessed with it because everyone likes to, after there's an experience of them barely touching hands, it seems like she's.
But again, that's an editorial opinion. That's a observation that somebody made on a videotape that may or may not have captured all of the context.
Right.
So there's a hand brushes against a hand.
Yeah.
You've formulated an opinion based on that minor contact or lack of contact. How does that define their entire relationship? And what does that matter to us as an American people?
Well, for a lot of people, they'll say, well, Facebook showed it, so it must be true, right?
Well, there you go. And
it was
again,
on the internet.
Is that fake news?
Yeah.
When we work on the internet all day long,
right,
and we know what matters to us and what doesn't matter to us. It is interesting, though, what is fake news, and I think it's going to be a struggle that we have for a long time, and I think it's interesting that it took our president, our current president, to come up with this idea, and all of a sudden everybody is obsessed with it.
Yeah.
It's how he's driven the conversation in that direction, whereas 5 years ago nobody cared.
That's true. That's true. Everyone loved the old, I guess the media skews to the Democratic side.
Right.
The president was a Democrat, so they were probably more embracing.
They were in tune. Everybody was on the same line of messaging.
And then you have Trump, who's a total outsider to this
Exactly.
arena.
He's outsider to the political landscape in Washington, D.C. There's a whole community in the D.C. area that is just politics 24/7, and he came from outside of that. And that's not how he reflects other people in other states doesn't necessarily jive with what people in D.C., New York, and Los Angeles think. So that's the interesting convergence or the divergence, I should say, of what's fake news and what's real news.
Do you think there was any fake news going around about the Eagles being disinvited to the White House?
Well, there was one unfortunate instance of fake news where a Fox News producer threw the wrong photo up on an 11 o'clock newscast on Monday night, and it showed the Eagles praying in the end zone, and it said that was kneeling during the national anthem. So,
I saw that photo.
So that's an editorial mistake that becomes fake news because, oh my God, they showed the players kneeling in the end zone. They didn't kneel. They weren't kneeling during the national anthem. Well, that's somebody like you or me making a mistake identifying a photo and putting it up on screen. But that drives a whole day's worth of opinion coverage, like Fox News, misreported this. In the meantime, the words didn't match the pictures, but the words were still valid. Now, I think It's not fake news that, we know that it's news that they didn't go down to Washington and they did not meet with the president. What we have to determine now, if we're an educated consumer, of news, we have to figure out, what do I believe? Do I believe that the Eagles organization told the White House that we're going to be bringing 80 players with us on Thursday afternoon, and then on Monday afternoon they called them and said we're only going to have about 10? And what are the optics of that? How does that look? Why would the president want to do that? Why would the Eagles want to do that?
Yeah.
So there's wrong on both sides of that equation. Right now, everybody's saying that the president was wrong to cancel it, but what did the Eagles do to correct it, or to change that, or solve the problem? They didn't seem to have a solution to the problem that both parties involved could embrace.
All right, well, next time we're on the show together, we'll have to talk about it.
Well, I think so. And the thing that I like to think of is, I mentioned this to you before the show, if you went to your place of work and protested something and your employer said, oh, I don't like that, you would be probably reprimanded or spoken to. I'm paying a ticket to an Eagles game. I want to see a football game. I don't want to see a protest.
Okay, so we'll pick that up next
Yeah.
time. So if you have questions for Money Matters, here's how to send them in.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says Send Us Your Questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
Welcome back. I am looking forward to introducing our guest. He has many names: Bill Dunkelberg, Dr. Dunk, but either name you call him, he is the Chief Economist for NFIB. It's nice to see you today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I enjoyed the discussion, and I hope I have some non-fake news that'll be of interest in terms of how the economy is doing.
Yeah, nobody wants fake news about that.
Well, there are times that we'd like some fake news because the economy is not always performing very well, and we'd like to hear it better. But right now, we don't have that problem. We really almost have the reverse problem. This economy is on fire, red hot, and that's producing very good results for us. We have a very low unemployment rate now, looking around 3.8%.
So that's legitimate.
Yeah,
Some news stations say that's not accurate.
Well, it's the official government number, using the same methodology for 40 years that they would use. So there are criticisms about the number. It leaves this out, leaves that out, but it's a steady number that you can at least compare over time. And we do have alternate measures that. You have the U3, the U6, because we throw in people who've been looking not just in the last 3 months or last month, but rather the last year. We'll count them as kind of tangentially related to the labor force and part of the unemployment problem. And people who are employed part-time but want full-time, we kind of count them as being in the U6 measure. They're not employed as fully as they want to be. So the 3.8 that we have, the 3 is a really great number, and the numbers that we have for minorities and Hispanics are the lowest in the history of the statistics. So things are looking really good there. Our growth in output is tremendous now. It's looking to run around 3.5% this year, and that's a lot better than the 2% growth we had for the last 10 years, which was really weak. So 50% more in the growth rate. Doesn't sound like a lot going from 2 to 3, but it's like huge for jobs and output and so on.
Wow.
So I spend my time looking at just part of that economy, the small business sector, looking at government stats as best we can measure it. They produce about half of our private GDP. That leaves the government sector out, half of our private output, and employ about half or a little better than that of our private sector workforce. And so what they do really matters. There are about 6 million employer firms out there. That is a firm that has at least one person they pay Social Security tax on. They 90% of them have fewer than. Want to guess?
10? No.
That's a pretty good
Is it
guess.
I thought
20.
20.
20, but most of them are under 10. So that's the group of people that I characterize as Main Street that employ all these people, in the economy.
Sure.
They're doing really well, so they're having a really good time now. A record number of them have a job opening they cannot fill
Why can't they fill it?
because there are no applicants to coming.
Really?
Yeah. The government today announced their measure of job openings now exceeds the number of people who are looking for work in the economy.
So I could get a government job pretty easily now?
Well, I don't know about a government job. They may not be the ones with openings.
Oh.
It's Main Street, it's small
Right.
business people that have all these job openings. It's particularly troublesome in the construction sector, where about 60% say, I have job openings I can't fill. If I could get people to work, I could build more houses, which would be good because we are short on houses right now. That's why house prices are advancing so nicely. So if you own your home, you're happy because it's about 6 or 7% appreciation every year now for a while.
How does
But if
that
you want to
affect-
buy a house, like my son just did in South Philly, you're not happy about the prices
Sure.
until you get in, and take advantage of that.
How do you factor that in with let's say, the condo market in Philadelphia and Center City?
Well, I
That's
don't,
just, there's so much of it. They just keep building more high-rise living. Does that impact?
people are renting them, or
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's the key. So they need more. They need more. And of course, we've got that millennium group, right? Which my son is about the perfect age for buying houses. We look at them demographically. The millennial group will probably not be at their prime house buying age for another 2 or 3 years, but that's kind of where they start buying houses, 32, 33 years old,
Sure.
somewhere in there. And we just don't have enough housing for them, and so the rents are going up like crazy. You look at the index, rental cost index going up. Of course, house prices are going up. Like, we need more housing. We can't get people
To
to
build
come out and build them, and especially the cheaper end. That's harder because if you've got a lot, and you go through 2 years, typical number, to get that buildable ready with all the stuff you need, the permits and everything, then what are you going to put on it? A cheapy house, or an expensive house to recover that same fixed cost in there. So we have a lot of issues there, but the economy is really doing very, very well, and we expect it to continue to do well through this year and probably into next year. And that'll, if we go till like May of next year, it'll be the longest recovery period in the history of the U.S. economy, which is not bad.
Wow.
That is pretty great. Do you think the tariffs are going to impact anything, the tariffs on metal?
Some, that depends, of course, on what you're looking at. It can't change the cost of a Coke can very much. But, there's a lot of aluminum in a F-150, which is, by the way, the best-selling car and priced above $50,000 in the U.S.
That is
Ford
interesting.
F-150. It's a luxury vehicle.
Wow.
Right?
And it's for construction workers, right?
Well, I think everybody buys them. They just like them because they like to drive around in their pick-em-up truck.
Yeah.
But anyway, but there's a lot of weight in a truck, aluminum or steel, and of course that could raise the price there. And it's interesting what's going on. We're not sure where this will all fall out. We do know that for a long time the U.S. has allowed itself to be kind of taken advantage of, and it was kind of part of our policy to help the rest of the world grow and develop. And if you look at what happened in China, I mean, they have a huge middle class now,
Right.
and they built a lot of that on trade with the United States. We bought all this stuff from them, created all those jobs over there. I mean, we do this, and so I think President Trump is right that now that everybody's kind of doing pretty well, we need to rethink some of the agreements that we made and renegotiate some of this. So
Sure.
we're doing it, and it'll be interesting to see how it settles up. In general, you can think of a tariff very simply. It's just as something that's going to make the price of whatever you buy more expensive. So we put tariff on imported cars or steel, you'll have to pay more.
I think it's fair. They tax us when we ship our cars to them.
At much higher rates than we tax theirs.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So I think that it's good that this is all being shaken up. It's kind of good to pick all this stuff up off your table and look at it in a different light and reconsider why did
Yeah.
I have it this way, and did that do what we wanted it to do, and is it helping our people here, or is it hurting our people here,
Yeah.
or it's a good thing to do.
And I think it's interesting, to your point too, it almost seems like the president is the disruptor in chief. He's disrupting.
Not
our
almost, he
yeah,
is.
our mindset is, okay, it's always been that way. Well, why has it been that way?
Yeah.
And when you talk about, how what we've done has benefited other countries and what China has accomplished, and it's like, okay, well, how do we change that to our benefit, but at the same time not totally destroy what they're doing?
Exactly. And that's a matter of negotiation, and you got to get together and how do you get negotiations started? Well, President Trump has his device. He goes way over here. Says, I'm dropping out of the trade deal. Okay, well, we're never going to do that, but then everybody works,
Right.
back together and takes a look at this stuff piece by piece, because that's what you really need to do. A lot of the pieces are the way we like them, and we want it that way. A lot of the deals and arrangements, but we do have to worry about our intellectual capital. We just let it go too freely, for example, and not clear that, given bigger global political kinds of issues, that's really a good idea for us to be doing. But certainly it's benefited our trading partners immensely,
Sure.
and that's okay, because we like a world where everybody is doing well, because then we don't squabble and we won't
Right.
fight, because if you've got something to lose, then you agree and you negotiate. If you have nothing to lose, like we sometimes think North Korea is in that position, then it's a different deal. So that's why I think the fact that we're actually going to start talking to North Korea is a good idea. I kind of think of the East Berlin, West Berlin deal. Remember, we put them together. I mean, that was although the best of the Soviet Union, it was still terrible economic conditions. And,
Sure.
putting them back together was very expensive for the West, really expensive for West Germany. But everybody's really happy with that outcome, because now, we all live together and we work together and we solve problems together, and that's the way to do it.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. I heard Justin Trudeau, that's his name, right? The Prime Minister
Right.
of Canada, who said the U.S. is still our friend. Like, he's not happy about the tariffs, but the U.S.,
course.
you're still our friend.
Yeah. And he should say that.
Yeah.
His job is to worry about the Canadian people,
Right.
and
Yeah.
the moves that are being made could damage some of the lumber industry and the auto industry over there. So he's doing the right thing to say, and then we'll work it out.
So I was poking around your website, and I was reading about the things that NFIB does for small businesses, and you go and lobby on behalf of us in regards to taxes.
We do. NFIB has a lobbying office in Washington, and of course we have representatives in all the state capitals to watch out there, because it's not just Washington regulation and tax policy that matters. It's also state and local
Sure.
stuff. It becomes very, very important. And so NFIB is basically, it's an issue-driven organization. The way they decide what's important is they take surveys of their hundreds of thousands of members, say what's important for you, line up the issues, and those are the things that we then go after and try to resolve, in a sensible way for the small business sector.
And it's a national organization?
Yes,
Yeah.
about 300,000 member firms.
Wow.
A lot of firms.
That's a
I only
lot.
talk to a sample. I mail 10,000 interviews out to a random sample of them on the first day of every month, and get a lot of data back on how they're doing. How are you doing? Are you raising prices or cutting prices? Are you expanding your business or contracting? Are you hiring or firing? Do you think we're going to be better off or worse off? 6 months from now, find out their attitudes, and all that translates into, of course, whether or not they're going to spend money and grow the economy and create jobs.
And that's what goes into your small business economic trends report, the
Right,
SBET.
every month. Yeah,
And you've been doing that for 45
45 years.
years.
Wow.
Wow.
Can
How
people
did you
download it? I'm sorry.
How did you get started with that? How did
Sure.
you? What was the first one like? And what? I know you're about to release the next
Yeah,
one.
well, it was very similar. NFIB had headquarters actually in San Mateo, California at the time, and I was teaching at Stanford. And they came to me, and they had hired some guys to go around the country. How can we be more effective in Washington? And I said, well, I'm a University of Michigan survey research trained guy doing the consumer optimism and all that stuff. if I were you and I had 300,000 firms, I would take a sample of them and start collecting data, because data talks in Washington and state capitals, where BS, there's plenty of that. So they did that, and I said, if you do this and just get a nice time series so we can follow the small business sector through good times and bad times and tough regs and easy regs, and then you've got something to really use to lever your position and make your case before the people who are setting up all the rules. And they bought that, and that's why we did it. So you can find it at nfib.org/research or smallbus.org.
That's how they can download your report?
Yeah, you can get the report and all the charts, wonderful charts, give you a real good picture of how things have changed.
All right.
Yeah.
So I recently, 2 years ago, finished the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program.
Very good.
Yeah, so they actually are following small businesses, and they define small business like you. And you have to send in your financials every 6 months for about 18 months. So it's really interesting when they talk about the growth. I mean, I got to see my own growth, about 60% in 2 years after
Wow.
finishing the program and really refocusing myself. I think maybe that's like something they should be looking at your organization, because I didn't know about it, and they should have told us, you should join this organization and access this data and have someone lobby for you.
Yeah, that sounds like a good program where you provide your data along with thousands of others, and then it can be aggregated and used to benchmark yourself and see how you're doing, and kind of also over time you can see whether everybody's doing better or worse. So maybe you can anticipate the next slowdown and then be prepared for it rather than get caught off guard. And that's what the fun thing with the data. Our data, pretty clearly indicate when we're going to turn down with about a 12-month lead.
Okay.
So when our index of small business optimism takes a turn and establishes a trend, not just a blip, but then probably things are winding down for whatever reason, and it's time to get ready.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. Thanks for joining us, Jim. Next week, we are going to hear from Kim Players, who's the CEO of Master Your Drone. So if you've ever thought about getting a drone, tune in, because she'll tell you how you can learn to fly it. Thank you for joining us today.